You guys good? Okay. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome to the monthly meeting of the City of Des Moines Zoning Board of Adjustment. This board has the power under Iowa law and the zoning ordinance of the City of Des Moines to hear and make decisions on requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, to review conditional use requests, and to consider appeals from any decision of city staff in the administration of the zoning ordinance. The members of this board are citizens of the City of Des Moines and have been appointed to this board by the City Council. The board members are volunteers and they receive no compensation for their public service. I'll introduce our board members present today. On the audience's right is Tom DeCio. Next to him is Dave Gare. Next to him is Rhonda Cedillo. On the audience's left is Justin Gross. Next to him is Marlis Jones. And I'm Mel Pins, the board chair. I'll introduce our city staff who will be assisting us today. Legal counsel for the Zoning Board of Adjustment to my left is Mr. Gary Guidelock. I'll introduce city staff. Frank Dunn Young, Senior City Planner. Bert Drost, Deputy Planning Administrator. And Eric Lundy, our Zoning Enforcement Officer. Assisting with meeting moderation here, the behind-the-scenes stuff, is Tyler Hall. And next to him is Carlisle Wolder. I'm going to go over our meeting procedure here. For some of you, this may be your first time in front of us. You may hope it's your only time in front of us. But we'll kind of go over how this works, but we will help you through the process. So don't worry about that. We're not going to leave you behind on anything. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial board. This hearing will be conducted within the procedures and format as authorized by Iowa law and this city's ordinances. The meeting is open to the public. The meeting is being recorded by both audio and video for a legal record of these proceedings. The board members have each received a copy of the agenda and the staff recommendations. The board is required to base its decision on each item upon the criteria established by law for the type of relief sought by the appellant. The law applicable to each case has been identified in the written staff report. If the facts, as determined by this board, demonstrates that the criteria established by law for granting the relief has been satisfied, then the board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the requested relief. Each item will be announced in the order that it appears on the agenda. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda are not planned to be individually discussed. They will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report, unless the appellant does not agree to the conditions recommended by staff, or if there's an individual or a board member that requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda so that a full discussion on the matter can occur. For that regular portion of the agenda, after an item is announced, city staff will first give a brief overview of the appeal, and they will present any written comments that have been received prior to the hearing. Then the applicant or their representative will be allowed up to 10 minutes to present their appeal. We'll then move to the public comment portion of the hearing on that item, and anyone wanting to speak in support of, in opposition to, or even in neutrality of an appeal will be allowed up to 5 minutes each to present their comments. This will be their one and only opportunity to address the board regarding the item at hand. Once all concerned citizens have spoken, the board will then ask any additional questions of city staff. And lastly, the applicant will be given 3 more minutes for a rebuttal or other closing comments if they so choose. All speakers must speak only from the podium here at the center of the room by the monitor there. They must begin their presentation by first giving both their name and address. That address can be their business or residence as appropriate, In the event, you may need to be contacted for legal notices that are related to the outcome of this appeal. All speakers are requested to remain courteous and to focus their comments only upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. Speakers are asked to ensure that they're respectful of time considerations, and if necessary, the board chair will limit further comments by a speaker if they exceed their time limitation. The board chair will then close any further public comment on that agenda item, and the board will immediately deliberate the request, and we will make a decision here today regarding the appeal. If your appeal is approved today, we ask that you wait until at least 1 week from today's hearing to contact the city's Permit and Development Center to obtain any necessary building or sign permits that are related to your appeal. This will allow the decision of the board to be documented in the form of a decision and order, which will be provided to you and to city staff. Any appeal that is approved by this board must be implemented, constructed, or otherwise utilized within 2 years of the date of the decision by this board, or such approval shall expire. Finally, the decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Iowa District Court. So if you believe you've been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong, you may petition the City Council to change those regulations for future considerations. All material, written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation is part of the permanent record. If you plan to present anything that you've not already given to city staff, you'll need to provide them with an appropriate copy of that. And you may contact city staff after the hearing if you need a copy of anything that's been presented today. Finally, just some housekeeping items. Please avoid any undue conversation in the audience so as to limit distractions during the hearing. You're doing a fine job with that. Please also ensure your cell phone has been silenced. If you need to use a restroom, just walk through the doors here. You don't have to go downstairs. There's restrooms just past the staircase on your left. We've only got a couple items today, so we shouldn't need to take a break in the hearing, but if we would get to 3 o'clock or so, we'll take a 5-minute break. So we'll get back to our agenda here. I'll turn this over to our city staff so we can begin the hearing this afternoon. And first and foremost, based on the printed agenda, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Bert Dross, planning staff for the city. Item number 1 was the only item on the consent agenda. We did get an email with concerns about that, so we will move that one to the discussion portion of the agenda.
Okay. Otherwise, that's it. Okay, so then what we'll do, we'll move to item 1. So staff will first give a brief presentation, then the appellant can give their reasoning for the request for their conditional use, and we'll hear from the public as might be appropriate.
Yes. So, Chair, members of the board, again, Bert Dross, planning staff for the city. Item number 1 is a request for a conditional use that would allow for sales of alcohol by a theater type use within the lower level of a building downtown. The subject property is located at 500 Locust Street, so on the southwest corner of Locust and 5th Avenue, so just to the west of Capitol Square. Here's a photo of the building. You can see there's commercial on the main level with the parking garage above, and then in the lower level is a space. If you're familiar with the Slaughterhouse Haunted House, that's there in October of each year. But they're wanting the conditional use that would allow them to use the space downstairs for like a theater or events space with alcohol sales. Mm-hmm. So here's a sketch that they've provided. It's about a 2,000 square foot area. They would have a stage with fixed seating. And again, this would only operate during the months that the haunted house use is not going on. So it's just November through September, so every month but October. Our staff recommendation is in support. We felt they satisfied the criteria necessary for granting the conditional use. We did recommend several conditions. I'll just highlight the key ones. So we just said that any sale, the first one is any sale of alcohol must be by business that operates as a theater or a similar type use that fits within the small assembly and entertainment use category. Another condition I want to point out is number 3, that they can only operate between the hours of 4 o'clock p.m. and 2 o'clock a.m. on any Friday or Saturday. during the months of November through September. And then the fifth one, Eric Lundy can speak to the enforcement issues, but they are out of compliance with their site plan. So we have recommended a condition that says prior to issuance of any liquor license, the site must be determined to be in compliance with site plan requirements. And then with any conditional use, the last condition is if the zoning enforcement officer determines that the operation becomes a nuisance, then they have the ability to bring it back to the board for reconsideration. So I'll put the email that we got in with concerns up here on the screen. So it's just an email from Bill Gray requesting that the board hear it as a discussion item. Again, I think his issues were the enforcement issues that have been going on, so Eric Lundy is prepared to speak to those. And then here's the consent map. We did get one card in support, which is for the property to the south. And I know that last month we had some confusion over what these two red rings are. The first red ring just represents a 200-foot buffer from the subject property, and then the outer ring represents a 250-foot buffer. The 250-foot is what we notify. So really, in this case, the outer ring is most important. And this is that card from Blackbird Investments in support. And then this is just this quick summary of their neighborhood outreach. They were required to hold a neighborhood meeting, but they didn't have anybody attend that neighborhood meeting. So okay. I guess that concludes my presentation. Were there any questions for me?
Questions for Bert from the board? Bert, I just have kind of just two basic ones. The first one would be, so it looks like this small performance theater, it looks like a fairly limited number of seats there. But when you look at occupancy, the number of people coming to an Enjoy event, is it based on the number of seats provided? Is it based on square footage?
Actually, Cody would probably know that. We have our building official here today just sitting in, but do you want to answer? Sure.
Hello, I'm Cody Christensen, the Permit Development Administrator. I can speak a little bit about the occupancy calculation for this use. It varies depending on the layout. So when we're looking at doing the permit code review for this type of a function, if we have fixed seats,
Yep.
that'll be based on 7 square feet per person.
Okay.
So we'll make an occupant load calculation based on that. If there are other proposed arrangements, say mixed tables and chairs, then it's 15 square foot per person. If there's ever going to be a standing room only event, then it would be as densely populated as 5 square feet per person.
Okay.
So at 2,000 square feet, you can do the math and get a rough idea.
Yep, I've got you. And I didn't ask this question just because I saw that you were here to get you to come up here. But related to that, then I see with staff recommendation, item 12 as a condition, all applicable building and fire codes will need to be met and all permits. So that would take care of a lot of that what they're proposing relates to what their occupancy will be. Is that right? For seating and layout?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. All right. And thank you, Cody. Second question was, there was something mentioned about zoning. Should we have Eric talk to that at this time first?
If you want to ask about the zoning enforcement or the pending enforcement, yeah.
Eric, I'm just curious, when we talk about zoning enforcement, we're talking about related to this site and this location, is that the case?
Yes. I know that some of the questions were revolving around other properties owned by the same owner, but in this case, I think the board would only be considering this property.
Mm-hmm.
In previous modifications to the building involving the main floor use, triggered the requirement for a site plan that was reviewed and approved by the city staff. And following that, there was not a demonstration of complete compliance with the site plan. Mostly landscaping items on the streetscape. In this case, those in themselves aren't going to be enough for us to hold up an occupancy of the space in the building
Okay.
But they don't have a permanent certificate of zoning compliance and occupancy for that alteration. So then, now they're proposing another alteration in the building, in the basement, which adds a different occupancy as well. So essentially, we're looking at the same process that they're going to have to be reviewed for their site plan. In the meantime, we treat, because of the nature of the cost of the improvements, that they're still deficient, we treat that as a civil equity case. So it's not a civil infraction where we're going to have fines involved, but rather we want to be able to require the owner to make the improvements under the site plan, and if they choose not to, then we can pursue further legal action for showing of no cause, where it's possible, that the city would step in and make the improvements and charge that to the owner at some point. But that's an extreme example. I think our hope is that we get compliance of things before, and certainly in this case, the board has the ability to put a condition that they won't be issued their liquor license until they've demonstrated that they've met all the requirements for their occupancy, so.
Okay, all right. Yeah, go ahead.
That email was mentioning other things like violations and public nuisance, so on this property, there hasn't been any of that?
The only
It's just the
thing
issue
that's
about-
under enforcement right now on this property is the matter of the site plan compliance.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you for the information, Eric, much appreciated. Okay, so for our next part, applicant or the representative of the applicant, you've got up to 10 minutes to present your case and your request for your conditional use.
Chairman, members of the board, Lloyd Ogle, 301 East Walnut Street, Suite 2, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm the attorney for the applicant. In this case, the ultimate business owner of the business is a tenant in the building. And as to the noncompliance on the site plan issues, we really became aware of this during the application process through the CUP. So we're in active conversation with the landlord to get the issues addressed, under anticipation that it would likely be that the board would require the site plan to come in compliance before we could get our liquor license. So we're going to actively work with the landlord on this. That space has been in same tenant for quite a while. It's an experienced operator. We're not aware of any nuisance issues, police calls, or any of the things of that matter. Ian Miller's here. I'm going to let him speak just a few minutes on just the concepts. You understand what he plans to do with the space, but practical matter, this isn't people going down there throwing parties. These are people coming down to see a play, to see a performance, and have the opportunity to drink while they do so. But, Ian.
Okay.
Ian Miller, 604 Locust Street, Suite 305, Des Moines, Iowa, 50309. So yeah, thanks, gentlemen and ladies of the board, for your time today. Essentially, as Lloyd said, we are using a smaller area within an already functioning theatrical attraction, the Slaughterhouse, to have a different type of theatrical event, as you know. And so essentially, I'm not sure about the nuisance report, but we run about 12 to 14,000 people through the Slaughterhouse Haunted Attraction throughout the October season. And we have on-duty police officers, and we have internal security officers throughout the entire show. We've never received a nuisance complaint, so I'm kind of confused as to that. When it comes to the aspect of the site plan stuff, I am in active engagement with the landlord, and if they are not willing to take that on themselves, we are going to take that on as a project cost to ensure that we can go forward with this project. The theater allows us to provide, of course, further entertainment throughout the year, which makes our business more viable going forward, as we'd like to expand and, of course, continue to create more theatrical experiences throughout the city. We have quite a large fan base in Des Moines and beyond, and we feel like we bring a lot to the city, so we appreciate your support on this matter. Any questions you have, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, questions for Ian or for Lloyd? Anybody? Okay, all right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Can sit down and we'll see what the audience has to say. Is there anybody here to speak in support of the applicant's request? Anybody wants to speak in support, just step on up. Seeing none, anybody here to speak in opposition to the applicant's request? Or anybody in neutrality? Seeing none, then any further questions for staff on anything? And Eric, you've addressed us. Anything else? Okay, you're good. All right, then we'll close the public portion and go to board deliberation. Any initial thoughts?
Chair?
Yeah.
It sounds like, if there's any issue, it's just related to the landscaping or the site plan, and it seems like there's mechanisms in place to address that if they're out of compliance, as Eric Lundy indicated. So I feel very comfortable moving forward with the staff recommendation along with the conditions laid out.
Any other thoughts?
Can we make
Okay.
a friendly amendment to this, to the conditions to include what Eric, because I think Eric's concerned about the landscaping even taking place. And it sounds like we have some recourse with that as it relates to a liquor license.
We do reference the site plan. Gary, do you have any thoughts for us with Dave's interest there?
Yeah, I guess I wonder, Dave, does number 5 on there, requiring compliance with all site plan requirements,
Well-
address what you're concerned or looking for?
Well, can I defer to Eric and ask him? As
Yeah,
staff goes?
I suppose we can. I just don't want to reopen the hearing since. it
No,
was
I don't want to do that either. I want to just address what his comment was to make sure that we've got
Yep.
him in a position where he feels like he's got the leverage he needs if we have to move forward with anything.
So I'll give you a quick rundown of the process. So when they would go to apply for their liquor license, we require an inspection through zoning. One of those is going through the conditional use items, which would include the site plan in this case. So if the site plan were not in compliance, we would not be able to sign off on that for the liquor license at that point.
And that's
So-
what
so I
condition
think
5.
I think we're in good shape with the way it's in here. In terms of our ability to enforce, I think that's already built into the code, so I don't think we have to add specifics on our ability to enforce.
That works with you, Dave? Okay, all right. And just as a nod to the applicant, 5 makes sense to you guys too? You can just nod yes or no? Okay, all right, okay. All right, I think then everybody's on the same page? Okay, but glad to have that mentioned, Dave, just for clarification. So was that an official motion by?
It can be, and I will make it a motion. Yep.
All right, so we got a motion by Justin, second by Dave, to approve the requested conditional use subject to the staff recommendation and conditions present. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. Okay, motion carries 6-0. All right, you guys keep working on that, work on that site plan, and keep her going. Thanks for coming in. Okay. And to item number 2, a conditional use request at 4815 Grand Avenue.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board, Frank Dunn, planning staff. The use being presented at 4815 Grand Avenue is a temporary use of the garage and rear yard of the property for a maximum 6 events each year between January 1st and November 30th, where the events would be related to an accessory art studio on the residential property. What I'd like to do is quickly walk through the premises and then talk a little bit about the temporary use and staff recommendation. And so as you can see, this is the property that's in question. It's surrounded by residential, and it is on the north side of Grand Avenue in between Polk Boulevard and Country Club Drive, I believe it is. And it's right across from the Des Moines Arts Center, which would be there to the south. And here is a photo looking what would be northeast across the front of the property. It's right in front of the property. And then another shot so you can understand the context of the garage in association with the residence that we're looking at. And here is a zoomed out aerial so you can see the context a little bit more with the house here, garage back here, yard to the rear there, and neighboring property owner, and then surrounding residents to the rear as well. And here is the site sketch, or the layout of the garage that was submitted as part of the site sketch. So it's, approximately 20 feet, give or take, along the other side. Went too far. And so staff is recommending approval along with conditions. The host is intending to have the events to celebrate artists and showcase them as they pursue their trade. The applicant has indicated that they only intend to have one event each month. The events would be free of charge. The refreshments would also be provided. Those would be free as well. It would be invite only. They anticipate there being approximately 20 to 50 participants. The hours that they generally would operate would be between 7 to 10. So for that 3-hour period, all the folks that would be coming would be directed to park on Polk Boulevard, or a number of the residents are within the local area, so they're neighbors, and they'd be walking to the premise as well. And so as part of staff, one of the, in terms of the artist studio, the temporary occupancy permit, that is something that could be approved. However, the quantity of the events and it becoming much larger than our artist studio itself, it was determined that it need to be elevated to what we call a type 3 home occupation. And so the temporary use is here in front of us. There are criteria that indicate supplemental regulations for type 3 home occupations, which limit the hours of operation, limit the number of clients or customers, and limit the number of non-residents. And so as we were considering this project and considering approval, we did recommend approval with conditions. I'd like to point out just a couple of the conditions real quickly. I'll zoom in so you can see those. And so the first one, temporary use for the events would be valid for a 5-year period to end November 30th, 2027. At that time, they would have the opportunity to come back and request another conditional use or a temporary use. In addition, I'd like to point to condition 4, which indicates the June 1st through November 30th with one maximum of one event each month. Then I would also like to point to 5, as it really reins in the hours of operation. So Saturdays and Sundays, Sunday through Thursday, we look at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., whereas if the event were on a weekend, it would be 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then as always, the zoning enforcement officer would have the opportunity to if the use became a nuisance, to bring it back for reconsideration. Here is a copy of, or a photo of the consent map. As you can see, we have 4 property owners that indicated support for the project, and 1 property owner that is in opposition. The ring, as noted in the previous presentation, the inner ring is for zoning purposes, and it's for 200 feet around the property. The notification area, however, is that ring, second ring, which is 250 feet. Here are the comment cards. And further correspondence by the applicant who was in opposition. And the structure.
Can you slow down just a little bit?
Sure.
And I'll let my colleagues decide when they're ready to move on there, but thank you.
Yeah. And this actually just came in right as we were walking out the door. Looks like that second page didn't get scanned. I do have it.
Okay.
And if we're finished, we'll switch back to the presentation.
Everybody good?
And
Okay.
here's the structure photo that was provided along with the letter. The applicant did hold a couple neighborhood meetings, and they did not, no one showed up in attendance. However, they were contacted by someone who was in support. What questions do you have for staff?
Questions for Frank? Frank, can you show not the radius aerial, but that kind of that angled aerial that gives a little perspective on the
On the front?
layout of, yeah, whatever you guys call that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then one more.
One more.
Oh, I was looking for that aerial. It looks like a drone picture. That.
Yeah.
So can your cursor work on the screen there? I think I know where the garage is, but can you kind of highlight that?
Yeah.
So there's the house.
Yep,
right?
there's the house. Should be noted that there's a shared driveway,
Right.
and the garage being here to the rear.
Okay.
And then my assumption is that this being the home's property, this is where the outdoor activity would occur.
Okay. And not to be persnickety, but you said that any amplified sound must be acoustical. To me, amplified's not acoustical, but you basically mean if it's amplified, it can't be vocal sound, it only has to be music?
I'll let zoning enforcement officer talk about that.
We've gotten into this before where sometimes either we've been confused or others are confused about what amplified and acoustic means.
So this is an N district,
Yep.
and they're going to be severely limited on their ability to comply with Chapter 42 of the city code, which this board doesn't have any ability to waiver from.
Okay. To comply
can
with
definitely
it,
refer
or
to
they're
it.
just limited?
The board doesn't have any purview to make any variation to that
Okay.
chapter. Okay, I just
Okay.
wanted to point that out. N districts are limited. The only sound permits that can be granted in N districts are based on street closure.
Okay, sure.
So they could do a street closure
Right.
and have amplified sound.
That'd be like a neighborhood party or something,
Yes,
right?
so I think when we look at that condition in the staff report, the type A is really not the right type that would be applied if that was the case. They're going to be very limited in being able to get a sound permit, to be honest with you.
Okay,
It's going to involve a street closure to do it in the N district.
okay, yeah.
Now, that said, non-amplified sound, like acoustic performances,
Yes,
is regulated differently by the sound ordinance. You don't require permits, but it has to be kept at levels that don't create a
Right.
noise disturbance,
okay,
which is, there's a number of criteria in the sound noise control ordinance which guide us in how that gets enforced. So
okay.
I guess if there's concerns from the
Yeah.
board's perspective, I would definitely reference compliance with Chapter 42.
Yep. I was just looking-
Regardless of
Okay.
which route they want to pursue.
All right,
My experience with enforcing in residential situations is that non-amplified is always going to create the least amount of impact on neighbors.
right.
So,
Yeah, if it's Lizzo showing up to play her flute, great. But if Winston Marsalis would show up to play, what, a trumpet, maybe
Yep.
that'd be different?
Yeah, so acoustic
Is
performances,
that right with him?
I think can be managed in a residential setting much easier than anything amplified.
Okay. And Eric, since you're up there, in a situation like this, I mean, I have to put a real fine lens on this kind of stuff when we're in an N district. I just think of people coming to a site, coming to a garage, coming to a backyard, using a driveway space. Where do we have those kinds of things happen in neighborhoods that are business related? Oh, a garage sale. How many garage sales can a person have per year?
So
If
by
anybody
our-
knows this,
yeah.
he will.
By our code, there's a limit to 2, but the duration can be up to a week at a time.
Okay,
So-
okay.
So there's certainly, considering the number of days, it wouldn't be much different.
Right, yeah.
when
And I know
thi-
this is different, but just kind of looking at what kind of activities are normally allowed that could bring a crowd, that might be business related, okay. So you can have 2 garage sales, but up to a week, yeah, okay.
So I was going to wait till my part of the order, but I could speak to how we've looked at this, if you want me to do that at the, that
I
way-
don't care.
That way
Perhaps
they can
that can
rebut
help
it or
the
whatever.
applicant.
So
Yeah.
this is in front of you because originally there had been a complaint. My inspector looked into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I believe there's a lawfully established home occupation, which would fall under what we call no impact now, based on state code. It would definitely fall within the type 1, the way our code is written.
Yeah.
Type 1 home occupation, which doesn't require any type of review or permit application. It allows home office, home artist, those type of things. The minute you start bringing people to the location for business type activity, certainly people can have their own parties, and we don't do anything with that, right?
Right.
Which, that was sort of conveyed to me, but my interpretation was that there's definitely a business relationship going on here.
Sure.
In this. So I wasn't prepared to say that was acceptable to have these parties where we're bringing people to the property. When you look at the type 2 and 3 home occupations in the code, I think they were running into some issues that were going to drive variance requests, possibly with some of the things in terms of the hours and so forth. So the temporary use was actually looked at as one of the options to sort of manage this and restrict it. That can actually be approved administratively, but I didn't believe in this case that it was at a level that met the administrative level that I could approve a temporary use. So then the way the code reads is that they are able to then apply for a conditional use to the board and have that considered. And from my perspective, I think that's the best way to manage the proposed activity. This doesn't take, anything that happens here won't remove their ability to continue having an artist studio in their home or something like that. So I did want to point that out. Any questions on that kind of how we interpreted it within the code? Thank you.
All right, thanks, Eric. Okay, all right. All right, anything else for staff? And we may come back to that after we have some testimony here, but we'll turn it over to the applicant. So you've got up to 10 minutes to present your reasoning for your request. We need you to start first with your name and address as appropriate.
My name is Garrison Bo Scott. I, along with my wife, own and reside at 4815 Grand Avenue. Before I share our statement, we'd like to correct 4 points from the staff report and recommendation that we received from the board. Our home is not a single story, it's 2 stories with an attic. While most of our attendees are invited, there is the possibility that through word of mouth or other means, someone finds out about and attends our event on their own. While we strive to promote artists working in and from Iowa, we feel it's just as important to promote artists from outside the area so as to introduce those who attend our exhibitions to the art they might not otherwise be able to experience. As of this date, we've achieved about a 50-50 split. In addition to Polk Boulevard, we have also suggested Blank Parkway, adjacent to the Art Center on the west, as a place to park, while encouraging all who can do so to take the time to walk to our event. We'd like to acknowledge Giovanni Cordova, Nicholas Tarpey, Eric Lundy, and Frank Dunn-Young for their patience and professionalism as we navigated the process that has led us here for you today. It was a process that, truth be told, began in 1994 when I met the woman that I would marry. She just graduated from college and I was taking a break from it. A crazy set of circumstances found us both working at the Iowa State Fair in the old-time portrait studio booth. For me, it was immediate, love at first sight, and our long conversations about art over the course of those 2 weeks only confirmed that she was the one. Somehow I convinced her of the same. Those conversations continued in Santa Barbara, where I finished my degree in photography, onward to San Francisco, across the country to Boston, and then in 2009 when we moved, finally, to Des Moines, bringing our story full circle. When we bought our home at 4815, it was the rare occurrence of reality exceeding fantasy, a dream I didn't know I wanted until it came true. It's the home where we raised our children and continued our conversations about art and the human experience is expressed through all the mediums used to share what we as humans find beautiful. And when we ran out of words or they failed to suffice, we'd walk across the street to the Art Center and stand in awe of what can be done when brush meets canvas, light meets film, and a soul meets its calling. Throughout our journey, we've done more than just talk about art. We've bought it when we could, sought new experiences where we could find them, and tried our best to create the art that would tell our stories. In 2018, I was asked to participate in a gallery-type experiment where a succession of homes would open their doors to showcase the creative efforts of local artists. It was called the Waterbury Art Walk. We painted our garage with not nearly enough coats of white paint, hung a few lights, and invited some friends over to witness something new. Then COVID hit. When its grip relented, we realized that we might be onto something, and so I approached a friend about exhibiting his photography in a solo exhibition that we'd host in our backyard. Everything about that night reinforced the idea that ours was a special setting and that our newly painted white walls were just as good as any other gallery. Last year we hosted 5 such evenings, once a month from June through October, featuring photography, drawing, sculpture, paintings, and designer toys. Artists from Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and California were showcased. Every word the attendees shared with Heather and I over the course of those 5 nights spoke of joy and amazement and appreciation for our efforts. A common question was, why isn't there more of this? We were approached by artists wanting to exhibit their work in our space, and before that year was up, we had booked 6 more shows for 2023. So it is with that anticipation and excitement and love of this experience that we ask the board to grant a temporary use permit so as to continue to share our passion of art with our friends and neighbors. To be able to showcase the works of those who might not be able to crack the door open of a more traditional gallery setting and give them the opportunity they and their art so justly deserve. Thank you.
All right.
I have 2 statements of support from people who could not attend. I was hoping to use some of my 10 minutes to read these to you.
Sure. Yeah, it's your 10 minutes.
There'll be 2. To whom it may concern, please forgive me for not being able to show up to your hearing today in person. We have an employee that is stuck in Waterloo and will not be able to be back for me to leave the store. I would just like to explain to the zoning board how important I believe the gallery is to our group of people. We as a group from Christian Photo have been to both photography events and enjoyed everything about it. We have told many customers and also many camera clubs who all jumped on board sharing the great events. I believe it is the best way to get all of the different people together and share ideas about photography and the arts. I also know firsthand how the gallery has helped one person get back into black and white photography and enjoy his talent again. The last gallery I attended also inspired a young man to find his deceased father's camera, a Hasselblad, and went out photographing with his mother, all because of Garrison's gallery. We know a few people in the art community, however, mostly are in the photography world, and both spoken to us about how they can't wait until the next show. I only hope that you will allow this event to continue to happen for the people in the community. They really need a place to connect and find a new way of doing things. Garrison has done a wonderful thing for the art community while asking for nothing in return. Please consider this approval for the people. Thank you. Brian Christian, Christian Photo. The next statement will be from an artist who is scheduled to exhibit her work in June. Her name is Tatiana Gincinti. Originally from France, she now resides in Des Moines. To whom it may concern, I'm writing this letter to express my strong support for Gallery 4815, the latter to remain open for future art pop-up and exhibitions. As a Des Moines enthusiast, art lover, and local artist photographer, I'm a loyal devotee of this independent gallery. Not only does the gallery showcase incredible unseen and eclectic artists from the meticulous owner's selection, but is also a place where visitors can meet with the local community, listen to folk music, and enlarge our art network. Opening receptions at Gala 4815 Des Moines are delightful events that offer culture, great conversation, and opportunities. There's more to her letter, but I feel that suffices. That concludes my statement.
Okay. Garrison, would you be willing to take a few questions from the board?
Of course.
Anybody? Once, going twice. I've always got questions. I just let my members go first if they have some. Garrison, nice presentation. I like to get down to some nitty-gritty things on questions. Shared driveways. I sure wouldn't want to have one. What a pain. I'm sure that however this shared driveway works, there are legal easements as part of your property records or abstracts, but how would you preserve your neighbor's access to their property with their vehicles while you're having one of these events?
There is zero hindrance to them accessing either coming into the property or leaving the property. There is no parking on site.
Okay.
As it is mentioned both in the presentation that the city gave as well as mine, all parking is directed either on Polk Boulevard, Blank Parkway, or just walk.
Okay. All right. And, you have rights to access your property with that driveway too, but, if somebody came in, let's say, to unload some furniture from Homemakers, they would be able to pull in sufficiently far enough to unload that and not block the driveway for that other person's access. Is that correct?
They would be able to move out of their home during one of our events.
Okay. All right. I've got you. And studio space, this sounds very successful with what you've been doing since about 2018. Is that right?
Well, the 2018 shows were sparsely attended, but we
but
saw.
you kind of started
yes,
with that nugget,
yes.
and it's been working.
Yes, the show in October was our least attended show. I think some of that had to do with the nature of the weather. It was very, very cold that night, as well as the artist being from Lincoln, Nebraska, so not a home base.
So since you've got other artists that bring their stuff in to do these shows, why not try to find a gallery space like at the factory up there at 2nd and University, or the one downtown off Keogh and 8th there? Why here? This sounds like it's more than just your stuff that you create.
Correct, correct. While owning and operating a traditional gallery has always been a dream of ours, a number of factors went into it. Number one, the cost. It's expensive to rent property.
Sure.
And I've come around to believing that our space is kind of a magical spot. You won't get the experience in a traditional white glove, white wall gallery that you do at our property. Lights in the trees, outside, grass, a nice gallery on the inside of the garage. It all makes for a very unique experience. And in the 30-plus years that I've been attending gallery shows on both coasts of this country, as well as in Europe and here in Des Moines, I've never run across an experience like it.
Okay. All right. Well, those are my only questions for now. Anybody else? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. For the next portion here, is there anybody that wishes to speak in support of the applicant's request? If somebody wants to speak in support, come on up. You can have up to 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Kyle Kerwin, and I live at 219 East Grand Street here in Des Moines. I would like to offer my support for this. I only have anecdotal evidence, so I hope that's okay. But I recently moved to Des Moines about a year ago, and one of my first events that I attended was one of these events. I moved to Des Moines in search of an art scene. I have a studio at Mainframe, and as Bo Garrison, as you know him, said, this is a very unique event. There's not a lot of other events that occur in the art world that are sort of similar to this. It's more like a networking garden party with like art events. So the atmosphere is very different than like a traditional gallery. Like a lot of people's guards kind of feel let down, and you kind of get to experience a different aspect of the local art scene. And I feel like that's a very important way to embrace and grow sort of that scene. I've lived, as Bo has, on both coasts, most recently from New York, and have seen underground art scenes thrive and push art into a more contemporary sense throughout like local environments. And I think it's a really strong position to take for local spaces to have outlets like this. And that's all I have. I have been to a number of these events, and they are very subdued, very kind of quiet, and they do stay to both sides of the property, if that means anything from an in-person perspective. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for coming down today. Anybody else that wishes to speak in support of the applicant's request? Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Brent Boyd, B-O-Y-D. I live 4829 Grand Avenue, just next door to the west, on the picture up there, from Bo and Heather. My wife and I have had the pleasure of living next door to them since the day they moved in, and in my opinion, no one will ever find more thoughtful and conscientious neighbors. We feel blessed. Part of the reason we feel that way is not just in our day-to-day experiences and travels with these fine folks next door, but is part of that is gallery nights over the last few years have just been inspirational. Living across the street from the Art Center, I can't think of a better place to expose other people in the neighborhood and friends of ours to original artwork, whether it be from locals or people that Bo and Heather have been able to bring in and share with everybody. As I said, right next door, our property lines are conjoined. Last year, Bo and I put in a 6-foot wide by 25-foot-long brick and limestone patio to make it more accessible for us to get to each other in the summer. Gallery nights is just a beautiful time of year for people to get together, neighbors, friends, and I can say I've been to every one of them and have not seen for ourselves or heard of any issues, whether it be noise or anything negative at all about the whole experience. It's just a beautiful way for neighbors and friends to get together and enjoy some original artwork and have beautiful, thoughtful conversations. And that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming down today. Anybody else that wishes to speak in support of the applicant? Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon. Thanks for everyone's consideration here. My name is Scott Henderson. I live at 2742 220th Street in Winterset. We no longer live in Des Moines. Although I lived and worked in Des Moines, met my wife in Des Moines, and bought my first house on Des Moines South Side. So I still consider myself a member of this community of Des Moines here. So I'm one of the artists who had the privilege of having a show at 4815 this year in August. I can't tell you how important this experience was for me as an artist. As an artist who creates sculptures that are meant to be outside, there's no better venue anywhere than a beautiful home and a beautiful backyard and a beautiful neighborhood. And I relish the opportunity to share my work with family and friends. I was also able to connect with other artists and art lovers in the art community. August 12th was one of the best nights of evenings of my life, honestly. Heather and Bo are amazing and beautiful people. They've embraced Des Moines and chose to live here. They've wholeheartedly embraced their task of growing and building Des Moines' art community, and they've leaned in and offered their homes and their hearts to this end. I sincerely hope Des Moines is still the kind of community that will allow and encourage its residents to make connections with friends, old and new, and experience art in a very personal setting. I just hope we keep Des Moines creative and connected and support the arts, and that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for coming up here to Des Moines today. Another supporter? All righty.
Michael Kugel, 341 49th Street. Live about a block away from Garrison and Heather. Speaking in support of the event, my wife and I have been to 3 or 4 events. I think it was described as a garden network party with exposure of various artists, and I would say that that's a pretty good characterization of it. I had a chance to meet some wonderful people who we've not had a chance to meet otherwise, both artists and non-artists. And it just speaks to Garrison and Heather, just how much they care about just bringing people together, care about art, but also bringing people together. Would not have had a chance to really meet a lot of people without these events, and really would like to see them continue.
Okay. Again, thank you for coming down. Anybody else that wishes to speak in support of the applicant? Seeing none, is there anybody that wishes to speak in opposition to the applicant? Anybody in neutrality? I'll throw out my Switzerland comment. Seeing none, do we have any further questions for staff? Dave's leaning forward pensively. Question? No. Okay. All right. Okay. No questions for staff then. I think we can close the public portion and go to board deliberation. Any initial thoughts?
I'd make a motion for staff recommendation. It's obviously, these guys are super passionate about this. They got a great following. I live in a neighborhood just like this, not too far away. So I may find one of your events one time. Sounds kind of cool, actually.
I'm sorry, I did not.
No,
Got your mic on?
I may wander over there one day when I find out you're having an event. I don't live too far from there, so I can walk. But no, I think this is a great way to build a sense of community. And I think it's important for our community to have more opportunities, I think, to share success like this, and it sounds like it's done in a real peaceful, professional manner that everybody has enjoyed it, and it sounds like it's something that's he's been able to share some success with others, and we've had, one artist come speak that obviously it was very important to him. So I think it's a great event. I wish him continued success with it. So I make a motion for staff.
Well, Dave, I'd like to throw one thing at you before we get much further. I've never seen a nicer group of people that are happy about their relationships, their art, how things work together. But I also got to look at some other things. We do have a neighbor who does not like this. That is the neighbor that is most closely affected. That neighbor submitted their comments in writing, probably the most thorough letter I've seen in the last few years. So as much as I like the concept, I have to keep in mind this is a neighborhood. This would be 30 events in 5 years, 6 events a year. I feel it's a little too intensive for this. This isn't just their art at home. This is other people bringing the art in for the events. Other people may come to the event that weren't invited. I feel it's a little bit more than my wife having a Tupperware party. I'm a little concerned about it. Not everybody does like it. Everybody here likes it. But the neighbor next door doesn't like it. And they're the ones that are the closest to it. So just wanted to throw that out there myself. Justin?
Chair, I think we can address some of Mr. Banstra's concerns, and I think we can do that by tightening up number 5 a little bit with what Eric Lundy pointed out by saying that it should be in compliance with Chapter 42 and take out the section about amplified sound. I think that leads to some confusion there. And then, because one of his comments was about a live band, right? Obviously, that would not happen with some, with this language, these conditions. I share your concern a little bit about, that it's not limited, it's not invite only. He said that it's kind of welcome for everyone, so that means, over time it could expand quite large. One way to address that would be to, decrease the number of years. We could maybe say 2 years and see how things go. Maybe that would also address Mr. Banstra's concerns. So I'm kind of throwing those comments out there to see what people think about that.
Good observations. And I will just see if staff might want to make a nod. If we wanted to just take out that part on number 5, do we have the authority to do that, or would that cause any problems? Since we're deliberating this and it's related to that, I just want to have Eric address it.
Well, I certainly think that we have to strike the type A because that's a type that can't be issued in an N district, so that's actually, that actually needs to be stricken.
So that would help.
So if you did want to allow some type of amplified sound, it would have to comply with Chapter 42. That's a very narrow opportunity in the chapter for involved with street closure. I think that's going to be a challenge along Grand Avenue. It isn't for the half marathon, but it is for one household to probably get something like that approved through the street use permitting process. So certainly, if you wanted to ensure that the sound levels of any type of sound are in compliance with Chapter 42, it's understood, but that would definitely reinforce that by putting it in the order, because then something in violation of that would be treated as a pattern. So when you look at number 10, if we pointed back to some issues with item 5, for example, then I think there's a stronger ability for us to come back with something that's problematic that might occur. And again, I'm not anticipating anything, but should that be the case, some of these things are, unrealized fears at this point, I think, for some folks, maybe. Until we got the complaint, I never had any concerns raised at the zoning level. So, this is, I don't
That's how
want,
most
I don't want
zoning-
to, as you did, I didn't want to discount the neighbors' concerns
Sure.
or anything like that.
Sure.
But number 10 is really your ability to bring something back. And we've done this with we've done it with bars, as you know. So it's not like we're afraid to bring something back to you if there's problems.
So temporary use is much like a conditional use. Once it's granted with conditions, if there's problems, it can be brought back.
It is. In fact, if you look in the code, when I don't approve the temporary use at an administrative level, then it becomes handled through the conditional use process by the reference in the code. So
Gotcha.
you could actually really say this is virtually a conditional use.
Conditional use.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. So Dave, you had a motion, right? So would there be a second to Dave's motion, or maybe a second with friendly amendments, not to be leading?
What about the issue about reducing it from 5 down to 2 or 3 years?
Folks, board members, even when your microphone is on, you got to be like Johnny Fever. You have to have it near you.
Okay.
You're all old enough to know who Johnny Fever is, except for maybe Justin.
I
remember.
was
I know who he is.
I was just asking about the possibility of reducing it from 5 years down to 2 or 3.
Maybe with a friendly motion that could be done, if somebody wanted to second that, and the original motion grantor was okay with that.
But don't the conditions allow this to come back if there's an issue?
They do.
So let's not bog this thing down.
Mhm.
That would be my, now,
leave that-
I'm open to friendly amendments. Sure. I think something like that, if it's going to be an issue, it's going to come back long before 2 years.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
That's
would-
my
I just
thing.
like having the discussion. I'm
Yeah.
glad Justin.
I'd be willing to bet a lot of money we won't hear anything from these people.
Yeah,
But
and
good
I just
stuff.
wanted to hear from others on the board.
I'm all for that.
I would second the motion with the friendly amendment regarding number 5 and clarifying, striking everything after only be acoustical in nature, right? We would be striking out the rest of that paragraph.
So it would end with, any live music or amplified sound shall cease by 10 PM during any event? But you're still allowing amplified sound? Is that right?
Shall only be acoustical in nature. It's kind of where I would end, and then
okay.
have a one additional sentence regarding the compliance with Chapter 42.
Do we still need to take out amplified sound in the above sentence? Or not?
Oh,
Yeah, in the second sentence, any live music or amplified sound. Could we just have any live music shall be acoustical in nature
yeah.
and shall
I think-
cease by 10 PM during any event?
Does that cover what you need, Eric?
And again, I'm not trying to lead you on what your
No,
intent is.
no,
But
Yeah, I mean, what I need is, I'm just wanting compliance with chapter 42. There is a narrow path to do amplified, but it's not
under our purview anyway.
Okay,
If you don't want to allow an amplified sound, then I would suggest just
that's fine.
not allowing it.
So I like your language.
Okay, if that's clear enough for the record, he's got it, so.
Yeah, thanks, that's good.
Okay.
All right, so that's a motion, and that's a second to grant the requested temporary use for the original period requested, subject to the 10 staff conditions, including some minor amendments to 5 that would prevent any amplified sound. Okay, all those in favor of granting the requested temporary use, raise your right hand, say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed? 2. Okay. All right, so it takes 4 votes to pass, so you guys pass on that. So I wish you well with that. We don't have further conversation, but you can talk to staff. It's been passed. So you guys are good to go. I would encourage you to reach out to all neighbors, including the ones that share a driveway with, and offer them some complimentary introductory art. So, yeah, but please talk to staff. You'll get a copy of our decision and order in about a week that'll have those conditions. And if you have any questions about the conditions, you'll have to talk to staff on that. Okay? All right, thank you all for coming in today. All right, I don't think we have a lot of business for today, but we do have minutes of the last meeting. So anybody who was here at last month's meeting, if there are any corrections to the minutes, please note those. If there are none, would there be a motion to grant approval of the minutes?
I would do that.
All right, motion by Marlis, second by Rhonda. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. All right, motion carries 5-0 because Justin was gone. Any other business we need to do? Elections aren't till April. And Rhonda, I think maybe, I might not have been able to tell you this, but Nathan Blake will be leaving the board after the March hearing. He couldn't be here today, but he's moving out of state. So next month's meeting will be our vice chair's last after 9 years. So, yeah. So I'm going to make sure he shows up. So he said he's going to be here. So I don't think we have any other business, so this hearing is adjourned.